Hi, I'm May Sim. I'm a professional astrologer with 16 years experience. I also teach astrology here in Singapore. My students run in the hundreds and come from more than 12 countries. And today, I'm going to be looking at how astrologers are portrayed in movies and how accurate the portrayal is. Now, we were only able to find one example of an astrologer's portrayal in a movie, and this is from the movie Elizabeth, the Golden Age, the one that stars Cate Blanchett. And it features the astrologer John Dee, played by David Threlfall. John Dee is actually a historical figure who was not just an astrologer, he was also an occultist. So I thought this was a very interesting portrayal. Now, understand in this movie that they've taken a bit of poetic license here because John Dee could not have advised Queen Elizabeth about the events that we see in this movie, since John Dee was traveling on the continent at the time of the events of this movie. But looking at how he's portrayed in the movie, you can actually see that his hall is portrayed like an observatory, and you can see astrolabes as well as globes. Now, interestingly, this is very accurate because you actually don't see a telescope here, and that is correct because the telescope was not properly developed at the time. And what you see is something called an astrolabe, and I have an example here. So this is an instrument that is being used by the more ancient astrologers in plotting the planetary positions, which modern astrologers don't really need to use anymore because, well, I mean, software does a much better job. But in the movie, it is accurate that he would have be using astrolabes to do his calculations.
The alignments of the planets is most unusual this year.
Mars is due to take the ascendant 3 days after the anniversary of Your Majesty's birth, and also on that day there is a full moon.
Now here he mentions Mars and the descendant and the full moon. Now this is very accurate because at the time, he would not have had the tools to be able to plot the exact positions of planets. So astrologers at the time would be looking at where planets were moving on the angle. So Mars on the descendant is just about right, yes.
Governs the fortune of all princes of the female gender.
Princes of the female gender.
I mean to say, a prince who is also a woman.
Yes, Dr. Dee, I am following you.
Yeah, so this is an interesting conversation because of that, ding-dong with the prince of the female gender. But I'm actually quite impressed by what they've done here because this is very accurate. You see, in astrology, there isn't a planet or an indicator for princess. But what you do get are indicators that would show people of high royal birth, such as princes. And you may also have an indicator to show whether somebody was of a male or a female gender. So in fact, John Dee would have seen not princess on the charts, but rather a prince of a female gender. And this is absolutely accurate.
What does it mean?
It means the rise of a great empire, Majesty, and the fall of another. Convulsions.
Which empire is to rise and which is to fall?
That I cannot say, Majesty. Astrology is, as yet, more an art than a science.
But I would say it's quite accurate here. Because in this case, Queen Elizabeth has got two enemies that she's fighting in this movie. One of them is King Philip of Spain, and the other is Mary, Queen of Scots. I would hazard a guess that John Dee probably does not have detailed birth information for both of her nemesis. So therefore, it would be not possible for an astrologer to say put 3 charts together, Queen Elizabeth, King Philip, and Mary, Queen of Scots, to be able to ascertain whose empire was going to rise and whose empire was going to fall. So although he says here astrology cannot say, I would disagree with that, but it would be accurate for him because he didn't have the charts of the other 2 guys.
Walsingham, would you leave us for a moment? And the private life of this prince of the female gender. What did the stars foretell there?
These are matters of state, Majesty.
Surely the stars foretell matters of state.
Of course, here we see Queen Elizabeth asking questions more on a private sphere rather than on a professional sphere. And I would say this is accurate because as far as astrologers have served kings historically, or in this case, a queen, in many ways they played more of a private advisor role than just being an advisor of the state.
Dr. Dee?
For such a prediction, I must look in a different chart. Wonderful. Such strength. You will need all your strength in the days to come. But you doubt yourself, my child. I have not seen fear in your face for such a long time.
Have I reason to fear?
Something as we can do. There are hard days coming.
So here, John Dee says he needs to look at a different chart if she has questions about her private life, and this is accurate. Because so far, whatever John Dee has been saying in this clip, it references mundane astrology, which is what we know as universal astrology. He is looking out for indicators of war, for example. And if she wanted to know more about her private life, it is accurate that he would need to refer not to those calculations, but calculations for her personal chart. But what I thought was very interesting in this clip was how he used physiognomy when he had her face in his hands. And while this is true, this is accurate for John Dee because he was known to have dabbled in multiple modalities, including face reading. But face reading by itself is not under the purview of a Western astrologer. But I did want to point out something that I thought was very accurate in this clip was the intimacy that you see between the Queen and her astrologer. Because historically, as astrologers have served kings, they have been a lot more than just an information advisor. And quite often, they were advising these heads of state with regard to self-doubt or have I lost my touch, or is it time? Is my time up? And so in many ways, this portrayal here shows the special relationship that happens between an astrologer and a queen.
But I am no prophet. I see no more than the shadows of ghosts.
At this point, we see that he's very stressed up. And he says, I'm no prophet. And this also is accurate because an astrologer doesn't quite get like a visual image or like a divine wisdom. It doesn't quite work that way. Often it's pure and very boring work about like getting information. So in this case, he's visibly frustrated because he wants to know if her empire is at stake. And it's quite clear that his calculations are either incomplete or does not give him a clear picture. Much like, how you gather clues like a detective, and sometimes the clues are not sufficient to put a story together. Well, my rating for the portrayal of John Dee in Elizabeth the Golden Age, I would say 9 out of 10. I am impressed by the accuracy of the portrayal of John Dee, and I thought the production team must have put a lot of effort into understanding how astrologers operated at the time. Well done.